Hey everybody, it's NoodleDog. Let's talk about character development. When I work with characters, oftentimes I have a lot of issues in how to make a character, or how to deal with a character, how a character comes out, and these things are always really important to me because making characters is what I do. And sometimes it comes easier to some people than it does others. And today I want to talk about that. I decided that I'd make a series about this, something that we can share at the end of it. We can have character discussions, we could talk about the characters we've made, and maybe, if you want to, you could join along with me. You can create a character, and we could talk about it towards the end of the series. So, this is character creation, video number 1. Let's talk about the basics. Now, believe it or not, step 1 is actually something people tend to forget when they're making a character. And the first question they should ask themselves when they make a character, or anyone should ask, is this character going to be usable? Is this character going to be for a logo? Or is it going to be for a design? Is it going to be something that I'm going to keep using? Sometimes you want to understand a certain level of connection with a character, because sometimes you can make a character and it could be the nicest thing ever, but it may just be a logo you may only use once. Sometimes you put too much effort into a character and they're only going to be usable for a certain thing. So you want to understand first of all that sometimes it's better to have a character and understand what you're doing with the character before you get really invested into them. Because if they become something that you may not fall in love with, or they fall out of love with because you're doing so little with them, you may want to reconsider how you're making the character, because you can waste a lot of potential with that. Step number 2, of course, would be actually making the character. Now, the first part about making the character, of course, you want to understand the species. What are you going to be making the character? Are you going to make it a human, an orc, an elf? Are you going to make it an anthro character? What are you going to do with that? No matter what you do, you want to understand the species and the things about the species that make it unique, so when you're making the character, you can go off of the base stats and then make something that's truly unique for you or fit for whatever you're going to be using it for. Next, you're going to want to create a personality. Is the personality going to be fiery? Is it going to be chill and mellow? Is it going to be all relaxed? Or is it going to be some type of deceitfulness in the character? You never know when you make these things, so you're going to want to be at least conscious of what you're making a character. You're going to make him interesting, you're going to make them boring or flat. All these design choices, especially in the personality, create a character that can be relatable or funny or what have you, especially if you're going to be using the character all the time. So a personality is really important in that area field. Next, you're going to want to talk about the design. This goes into a long list of things for the design, but a couple of things that you want to, of course, deal with is what the character is going to look like, if they're going to have anything special like tattoos or scars, or they're going to have piercings. Are they going to have features missing, or are they going to have additional features? Will they have multiple tails, multiple ears, one eye? Are they going to have no eyes? Are they going to have no teeth? These things you want to keep in mind too, because this all creates a character and creates interesting lore-based opportunities that you want this character to eventually have, especially if you're going to keep this character hanging on for quite a while. So that is something that you're going to want to keep in mind. Another step that's pretty important is you're going to want to go back and reaffirm about this character. Once you've made the character, are you sure about this character? Are there any variants you want to try? Do you want to create this character and have different renditions of the character? Because this is actually pretty interesting too. Especially if you make a character and you quite like a design, but you see something else and you make more than one design. You have multiple ones set up and you can use each and every one in some way, shape, or form. That's the power of what a character has. You can have different color designs, different recolors, different clothing options, different things like that, different piercings, different tattoos, different styles. Hell, the character can be different species in different timelines, but it just depends on how you work with it. You could always have a redesign used for something else. You could always use it multiple different ways to create a character that's multifaceted. And you could always throw a character into the washing machine, wash them clean, make them a blank canvas, and bring them back so they can create something completely different as if nothing ever happened. Just a thought. Once you have your character all figured out, you're going to want to do some research about the character itself. Did you do enough justice with the character when you created them? Is what I've made the character for fit the character's lore or story background? Sometimes that doesn't always fit properly, and you can always readjust the character based on how you feel. It's your character after all. Change them and adjust them however you see fit, and eventually you'll have something that you feel proud of. You're going to want to justify why the character is one way or another. Sometimes if you have a character that's really bright colored or something that's really dull colored, in a world where it's really bright or really dull, you're going to want to justify why a character is the way they are sometimes by giving just some type of explanation. Sometimes that kind of thing that little detail can push a character over the top and make them really interesting or really special. You're going to want to keep notes at hand so you can jot down things that you might want to add to their lore later. I do this very commonly too. I always have a sketchbook or I always have a tablet on hand so I can actually draw things out, or I can write things down if I find something interesting about a character, or maybe it just popped in my head and I want to write it down, so just in case I could put this onto the character for later use, so I can always have this facet about the character that I would have just randomly forgotten if I didn't write it down. So I always have notes ready. You never know if you'll be able to use them. Another good idea that you may want to consider is possibly looking at other cultures. Other cultures are really important when it comes to creating characters, I feel, because they create a more believable character, especially if you don't understand anything about a culture, but you want to be into it. A good way to get through this is to probably look at something like maybe a history book, or look through articles online of cultures that may be interesting to you, and if they fit the character, why don't you add them to the character and see how they work? Just be careful about how you implement a character with the culture. You never know if you may offend somebody just by the way you incorporate something to someone else. Just a thought. And of course, don't forget to decide a backstory for your character. Decide something that might be interesting for a character. The present story and a backstory don't have to always correlate, but you can always put a backstory on a character and make them interesting just because it adds depth to a character. So you never want to go into a character, especially if you're going to be using them for multiple things or for a story, without a backstory, because if they don't, they can seem kind of flat. And now look at you. Here you are with your own new character. It's all cute, it's got its nice little costume going on, it's got some piercings or something, whatever you got going on over there with your character. It looks pretty good. You got a backstory and everything, and you understand this character is unique to you, and that you're going to love this character, I hope. Now comes some other stuff that you might want to do, some housekeeping, if you will. I have a couple suggestions that some people may or may not like, or they may take to heart, or they may just find them as weird or interesting. Personally, I do this when I go through my checklist. If your character is overpowered, you might want to give them a good reason as to why, or find ways to counter this and make the character a bit more relatable. I personally find this particular one an optional task, but sometimes if you want a character that's a little bit more complex or a little bit more interesting, you could always give them reason as to why, so logically it makes sense in the world they live in. If a character looks too complex, consider designing alternatives so they don't look too crazy or they're too hard to work on consistently. This is a problem, especially if you're going to be making characters for, I don't know, maybe for other people to draw or for things like that, because what ends up happening a lot of times is that a character could be too complex and then you can't consistently work on the character, and then it breaks the immersion when you're working with them. So just a thought, you may want to make a character that might be a little bit more believable, especially in the looks department. If it's got a little bit too much going on, you may want to consider toning it down, just a bit. Don't forget, complexity makes a character believable. Characters can become flat if they only have one note to them. However, this can also work in your favor if you capitalize on one thing and make the character a caricature of something. Say for instance your character is super strong and that's the only thing that they are. That can be kind of boring. However, if you were to capitalize on such a thing, you can take a character and make them the ultimate pinnacle of said thing and then make them really interesting again, because that's their character trait. Just make sure at the end of the day that the character is well represented in the way that you're making them. If the character is going to be a mean, spiteful character, make sure you do them justice. Don't just give them a character trait and don't use it. That'd just be wasting their character, and I don't think you want that. Finally, don't forget to have fun when tweaking a character. If a character isn't something that you want at first, don't forget that you could always go back and fix the character. Oftentimes they don't come out the right way you want to at first, and sometimes it takes a couple of weeks or maybe months or even years before a character is somewhere that you want to do. If you find some passion in a character, keep going with them, keep working with them. Eventually they'll actually come into something that you might actually like. I have a couple years where I had to work on my personal character, and now that he's where he is, I personally really enjoy him, and it took so much dedication and time and just love from other people until I realized that this is what I wanted him to be, and this is where he stays today. So keep that in mind when you're making your characters. Have fun with them. You never know what might happen with them. And just like that, the video is pretty much it. We're going to actually go into making a character in the next video. We're going to be making a cat character that I've had in my mind for a little while, and I want you guys to go on the journey with me. Like I said, if you guys are going to be making this character with me, don't forget to send it to me on Twitter. My Twitter is @NoodleDog. That's noodle with 2 zeros instead of 2 O's. It's strange, I know, but keep that in mind. I have a Patreon and I have a donation drive going on. Links are down in the description below. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this video. I'd really appreciate it. And I will see you guys in another video. Take care, everybody. Bye.